Welcome to That's Good Sports. I'm Brandon. I'm starting to think Gary Kubiak is a wizard perna. Gary Kubiak, along with Mike Shanahan, got the best football out of John Elway and the Broncos offense. 2 Super Bowls, good. Gary Kubiak somehow got a great season out of Joe Flacco, which tricked John Elway into signing Joe Flacco, which was clearly revenged by Kubiak, who left Denver when Elway wouldn't allow him to keep his current coaching staff under Vic Fangio. And now Kubiak has Kirk Cousins playing the best football of his career and a Vikings offense that is top 10 in most statistical categories despite the slow start to the season. Kubiak also managed to get the Super Bowl victory with a deteriorating Peyton Manning, a miraculous 2015 season that will never be forgotten here in Denver. You are a Cowboy wizard, Gary Kubiak, and I pray for your soul that Jerry Jones never ever realizes that. Today, I have our weekly in-depth Broncos versus Vikings prediction episode. Whew. That's good sports. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Huge Patreon announcement. We launched our very first Patreon-only episode. It is up on my Patreon page, patreon.com/thatsgoodsports. Thank you guys so much for your support. That video is available for all $5 sponsors, and I'm truly, truly just fucking honored that you guys give me your money, and am so thrilled we could add this reward. We're gonna try to do videos just for Patreon once a month, once to twice a month. It depends on how crazy busy shit gets here with the football world. But thank you guys, and your big dick Patreon shout outs are for Flynn Van Hemmen, Jory Weller with a $40 donation. Jory, what are you doing? Thank you. Abel Diaz, Benjamin Grundner, Kevin Childress, Angelo started this for Perna FYTB, both upping to $5. Gage, Taco Bell, Pueblo Proud, Gonzalez, add me on Snapchat, Taco Bell _2001. Show the Raiders some love, bitch. I've been fair to the Raiders recently. Sheer luck. Jacob Nash, Miami Dolphins have the longest win streak in the AFC East. Suck it, Pats. I think you up to 5. Lance Merith, and Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself. All right, Minnesota does get a half-point advantage. We know the SKOL Vikings is a wild bunch of fans who survive off of strong brew and bird skulls. That's where the word skull comes from, as US Bank Stadium kills more birds per year than any other building in Minnesota. This building kills 500 birds a year. The next most is 250 over 6 migration cycles, so it's really the Stalin of architecture there in Minnesota. Also why the Packers got rid of AJ Hawk the day Vikings broke ground on this monstrosity, and why Ian Eagle refuses to call a game there. Luckily, Derek Wolfe should be just fine. Coaches versus coaches. The Broncos face their former lover, Gary Kubiak, and his son, Clint Kubiak. Mike Zimmer may be the head coach and Kevin Stefanski the OC, but I'll talk about what I know. Gary and Clint Kubiak. I'm not sure why, but the name Clint spelled with a K feels inherently dirtier than the regular Clint with a C. Anyone know what Clint Kubiak's middle name is? So yes, Gary and Clint Kubiak are family, and they have a level of familiarity with this Broncos team, either because they coached them or scouted them. They know the weaknesses of this Broncos defense, and there aren't many. But I expect Gary Kubiak to add a heavy dose of Kyle Rudolph into the game plan. Not just because the Broncos typically struggle with tight ends, kind of a story that's dying down, by the way, or because Adam Thielen is out, but because he's a festive man who knows the holiday season is approaching quickly. He's also probably the only Rudolph in the NFL who knows where the fuck he is right now. On the other side, it's Vic Fangio, and he has a lot of familiarity with the Vikings, having coached against them 8 times with the Bears. There's not a secret recipe to stopping this team other than keep Dalvin Cook down or on simmer. And it's very feasible the Broncos could contain him. The last 2 running backs they faced were Marlon Mack and Nick Chubb, and they held them to 76 yards and 65 yards respectively. The Vikings have 7 wins, so Advantage Minnesota. Brandon Allen versus Kirk Cousins. Brandon Allen had a nice preseason game to start his Broncos career. Both his real preseason game against the Broncos and his starting debut against the Browns, which I consider a preseason game. He got the win, but more importantly, he never tempted Myles Garrett to split his wig. Allen now faces a real defense, and he has to play much better. He has to play so well that we start calling Kirk Cousins Kirk Allen. See, Allen isn't a surname. It's the designation you are given as a novice white quarterback. Once Brandon Allen achieves the first stage of enlightenment, he gets to move up in the rankings and select a new last name. Josh Allen and Kyle Allen still await enlightenment as well. But if Brandon Allen wants to carry over his success from the Browns game, he'll need to adapt. Most of his big plays were from one-read throws, and most of the offense was generated on a few big plays. The Vikings are too smart of a defense to allow that over and over again like the Browns did. We'll see if he got a little more comfortable with the offense over the bye week, and if he picked up some more chemistry with the first team offense. And Kirk Cousins is having one of the best seasons of his career. 18 touchdowns to just 3 picks, 3 games with the completion percentage of 80% or higher, and a huge primetime win. And now we know for sure Gary Kubiak was the perfect marriage for Cousins, and Elway should have figured out a way to keep Kubiak so we could all be married to our beloved Cousins here in Denver, just the way we've always wanted. Advantage, Cousins. Broncos defense versus Vikings offense. The Broncos signed famous Patriot fumbler Cyrus Jones after cutting corner Cody Sensabaugh. Jones was cut by the Patriots after fumbling on kick and punt returns, and then this season the Ravens just did the same thing for the same reasons. Vic Fangio said he was primarily signed to add corner depth, so I doubt we see him handling punts. Denver had depth concerns at corner all season, and it looks like Bryce Callahan will be heading to IR, which is another reason the Broncos may continue to work guys out at corner. Adam Thielen, though, is out with a nagging hamstring issue. It will not stop yelling at him to take out the trash and be nicer to his mother-in-law. If there's a downside, though, to the Vikings offense, it's that they have lost 7 fumbles this season and put the ball on the ground 19 times. Just 7 losses makes them pretty lucky because 19 fumbles overall is second most in the NFL. Maybe the Broncos steal a turnover on a fumble. Speaking of seconds though, I think Dalvin Cook is the second best running back in the NFL, barely behind Christian McCaffrey. I discussed this at some length in my Monday Vikings, Packers, Steelers, Dolphins recap. I think Run CMC has done just a little bit more with a little less in Carolina, but that's not good news for Denver. Cooks still has 10 rushing touchdowns this season, and when he's not in the game, there's this other really good running back, Alexander Mattison. And he is also averaging exactly 4.9 yards per carry, just like Cook. In fact, the only 3 running backs who average exactly 4.9 yards per carry all play Sunday, with Phillip Lindsay being the 3rd. I already discussed how good I thought Alexander Johnson has been at linebacker in my State of the Broncos episode this week, and I don't like repeating myself. Unless it's a Phillip Rivers has a lot of kids joke, or I find a new way to mention beating Goff when referencing Jared Goff. So, I believe Denver's 4th best passing defense can hang with Minnesota sans Thielen. And I'm confident about the run defense, but not so confident that I don't give the Vikings and Dalvin Cook a small advantage. Special teams versus special teams. Britton Colquitt, the one who got away. Sort of. Colquitt was Denver's punter from 2010 to 2015 before they, for whatever reason, decided to draft Riley Dixon, sign Marquette King, trade Dixon, cut King, and then sign Colby Wadman, which is where they are right now. Interesting stat though, Colquitt never had a punt blocked while he was a Bronco, but had 3 punts blocked during his 3 years with the Cleveland Browns. Colquitt and Wadman have pretty similar stats this season, so I don't think that's worth debating too much. For that matter, Dan Bailey and Brandon McManus also have pretty similar numbers. The place where I think there's an edge is at kick/punt returner, where the Broncos are getting 8.2 yards per punt return from Deontay Spencer, which is 9th best in the league. They also, like I said, claimed Cyrus Jones this week, who despite the fumbling problems, averages 9.42 yards per punt return. So if Denver is smart, they put both guys back to return punts at the same time. That is impossible to defend. Everybody knows that. Half point for the Broncos. Broncos offense versus Vikes D. Now that Phillip Lindsay is moving out of his parents' house, out of their basement, it will be a lot easier for him to score off the field. But in Minnesota, it might just be a little harder for him to score on the field. Now to you, Chip, in the field. Well, it's still just alone here. Whether it's offense or defense, the Vikings have running figured out. The Vikings defense is allowing just 91.2 rushing yards per game. That's the second best in the league, and have also allowed just 2 rushing touchdowns on the season. That's number 1. Surprisingly, the Texans are second with just 3 rushing touchdowns this season. And not that this is relevant to this game, but the Chiefs, 148 rushing yards per game, tied for second worst. Suck it, Chiefs. Now the Vikings, without defensive tackle, Linval Joseph held Ezekiel Elliott to just 47 yards rushing. Joseph is out again for this game with his knee injury. Again, they played well without him, but that's an advantage for the Broncos offensive line and running backs. Linval is a monster. Minnesota is very hard to run the ball against, which means the Broncos need Courtland Sutton to play very well and Noah Fant to have his second big game in a row. But the guy who may make the difference for the Broncos is Tim Patrick, back on the field for the first time since breaking his wrist week 1 against the Raiders. Last season, it was Patrick at times who looked like he could be the number 1 wideout in the Broncos offense, so I am very excited to see what he brings to this game. Now, knowing that Dak Prescott was 3 yards shy of throwing for 400 against the Vikings gives me hope Brandon Allen can have success in his second game through the air. The caveat, the Vikings will have their corner, Trey Waynes, back on the field. He was out for the Cowboys game. Wide receiver Deshaun Hamilton and right tackle Juwan James both practiced this week and are needed, as the Broncos are basically using one wide receiver right now in Courtland Sutton, and we can always use a little help at tackle. The problem is Hamilton is questionable and James is doubtful. So I think we'll have another week before Juwan James gets back on the field. Minnesota really does have the point advantage in every area except for my special teams prediction. There's a reason they are 10.5 point favorites in this game. They exhibit balance, and when one side of the ball doesn't play well, the other side really picks it up. That's kind of been their story this season. They are very beatable though, with losses this year to Matt Moore's Chiefs and the Bears, in addition to a loss to the Packers. Again, there's a lot of young, developing, and promising talent on this Broncos team, but I would never, ever bet against the wizard cowboy Gandalf himself, Kubiak of the Gary. Vikings win. Thanks for watching another episode of That's Good Sports. Please subscribe here on YouTube. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, at Brandon Perna if you want to follow me there for fun and talking footballs. Also, at Wilkie6, give him a follow on Twitter. He helps me write football shit here every week. He's a good shit writer. So give him a good old shitty follow.